last topic here in this conversation. I mean, we can talk forever here. So, and I am sure you guys don't worry. I'm gonna have Ray back here on the channel on both. So don't you worry. When he has time, he'll be back here with us. So, Ray, I want to get your feedback or your input, rather not a feedback, but rather your insights as one who spent a lot of time regarding the Soviet Union back then and so forth. Regarding the Ukraine conflict, I got a word that the CIA director is going to be heading out to Ukraine. The Secretary of Defense was in Ukraine about a week and a half ago. Are all this a sign to bid farewell to the president comedian Zelensky because Ukraine is a failed state? Or how do you interpret that?
Well, David, if you believe Joe Biden, the president of the United States, Russia has already lost, right?
Oh.
Now, I like to refer to that faux pas that Annalena, what's her name?
Burbank of Germany.
Yeah,
I remember that, right?
It's not so. It's 360 degrees different.
I remember. It was crazy to hear that from an official like that at that capacity.
And she got an A in geometry. Anyhow, David, it's 180 degrees away from what Biden said 2 months ago. Okay, so here's Austin. What did he say 3 months ago before Congress? We've given Ukraine 90% of what they need to prevail. We're very hopeful that this counteroffensive is going to work for them, okay? And we're just going to stick with Ukraine for as long as it takes, okay? Well, now, so that was Austin 3-4 months ago. Now it's a different story. Now he knows that it's 180 degrees, not 360 degrees. He's in Kiev last week, and he says, sorry, guys, but we did give you 90% of what you, I mean, we gave Dissolution, the head of your armed forces, 100%. I mean, 80, he listed it, and we gave all this, and you still lost. I know we encouraged you. I know you were reluctant. I know, well, anyhow, you lost, right? So what are you going to do now? Congress not going to give us any more money. We don't have any 155 millimeter shells for your tanks or your artillery. I mean, we had some, we were going to earmark them for you, but on Congress said, no, give them to Israel instead. So we don't even have those. So, you know, you better learn to fish and cut bait. You got to learn when to hold them and when to fold them, as we used to say. Yeah. And it's folding time now, because you can do what you want. You can pretend, as Zelensky still is, that you're in this fight to the end. Well, the end is next month, guys. You realize that? And we're not going to come in and backfill you. Those Russians can go all the way to the Dnieper River, as you know, but they're going to do attrition for a while. So it's going to be when you decide you've been attrited enough and you stop recruiting 17-year-olds and people almost as old as McGovern here and women into your armed forces. You got to face reality. Now, Zelensky is less delusional than Zelensky, right? So what's going to happen? Well, it seems to me that Zelensky has feathered his bed. He's got a villa in Tuscany, I'm told, maybe a couple others. You know, it's time for him to do what the head of Afghanistan did a couple of years ago. Load up that plane with as much cash as you can and get the hell out of Dodge, right? Yeah. That, I think, is inevitable. The sooner the better in terms of what happens to the Ukrainians that are still trying to man those defenses. You know, what's really interesting here is that the Ukrainians could have had a deal. I'm wrong. The Ukrainians did have a deal at the end of March 2002.
We prevented the Ray from moving forward.
We prevented the Minsk Accords from moving forward. And not only that, but Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany, bragged about it. December 2022. Yeah, the Minsk thing. Well, that was just a little stratagem to give the Ukrainians time to build up their armed forces. Look at them now. 6, 7 years ago, they were, look at them. And then Francois Hollande, the other guarantor of this thing, said, oh, yeah, well, Angela is right. It was just a matter of giving Ukraine time to arm up with NATO standards. So the worst thing, though, we know now that Gerhard Schröder from Germany was also asked to play this middleman role. A fellow named Bennett, who had been Israeli prime minister, also attests to the fact that the deal was reached. What happened? The Russians invaded on the 24th of February 2022. Immediately said, look, let's talk about this. Did they invade with enough forces to take over Ukraine? No. 90,000 is barely enough to move toward Kiev to frighten them. Did they frighten them? They frightened the hell out of them. Zelensky said, let's talk. They got together in Minsk in Belarus at first. And well, the talks led to Istanbul, Turkey. And by the 29th and the 30th of March, a deal had been initialed. Ukraine would not join NATO. Ukraine would be neutral. That was the base. There were lots of codicils where you could deploy forces. The whole thing was reached. Now, why do I rehearse all this? Because just this week, 2 days ago, the head Ukrainian negotiator, who's part of Zelensky's party, who's part of a big wielded part in the Ukrainian parliament, he says, well, that's right. That's what we had. We had this deal, and I was the negotiator. My initials are on that thing, and we probably should have taken it. Well, yeah, we could have saved 500,000 young Ukrainian men from death and destruction and the whole business. The only people profiteering from this are the Mickey Mat, the people who make and sell the arms and will be in business now for quite some time, and including the agro business. I mean, the Black Earth there in Ukraine, I've been there. I've done that. I've dug a trowel in that Black Earth. You won't believe how fertile that is, okay? And the agro business, Monsanto and the others are in there big time. So it's really, the whole thing just smells to high heaven. And what I want to make is the point that this need not have happened. And who's responsible for this? The Blinkens and the Bidens and the Sullivans that they still think that we can work our will on all this stuff and the Russians can take a beating from us, sanctions and so forth. Nothing could be farther from the truth. And the sooner they realize that, the better for everyone concerned.
They are amateurs, Ray. That's what I call them. So I have nothing against them, but I call a spade a spade. If you are not qualified for the position, because they're lacking the depth in understanding how geopolitics is, how international relations are. I mean, you go back into the 70s. You've been around long enough to know, Ray, that we asked the question, had we sat down with the Soviets back then and the Chinese together, we will have a different outcome in the global affairs today. But we choose not to, because we wanted to always create that enemy, whether real or perceived, to justify whatever policy. So now we're living with the consequences of it. And having a president pushing us towards some over the cliff here, this kind of makes you wonder. As a citizen, I ain't going to stay quiet. You're going to speak the truth, for that matter. I want to ask one final question before I let you go, Ray. And by the way, stay with me at the end after I say bye to our viewers and so forth. Will it be fair to say now, because I look at it this from using the history of World War II, moving forward, how Europe used to be, because to me now Europe is more divided than ever, more weaker than ever. And will it be fair to say now that the Berlin Wall that was in Germany now has moved into Eastern Europe? Will I be fair in this assessment, looking at it that way? How the Russians are thinking now?
Well, they've actually referred to situations just like that
Hmm.
As you know, after promising Gorbachev we wouldn't move NATO 1 inch to the east,
Yeah.
it doubled in size. It doubled in size in the next few years, with all those countries now well more than 1 inch to the east of the East German border. So the new Iron Curtain is the one that goes on the other side. Well, it divides the Baltics now
No.
from
Okay.
Russia, and it goes right down Poland and the rest of it. So, but that's not going to last very long, because
Mm.
you have the Slovakia, you have Hungary, you have voices in other parts of the former Eastern Europe
Yeah.
saying this doesn't make any sense. We thought the U.S. was had our good primarily in mind. We thought we needed to be defended against the Russians, and we really don't, because we see this. We see what happened in Ukraine. One last thing that never is brought to mind here, David, is
Yeah.
this factoid. Okay, we ran out of the basic ammunition shells, 155 millimeter shells that I trained with at Fort Benning 5 decades ago. Okay, 155, 105 millimeter howitzers and so forth. All right. So
Yeah.
now, if Russia was a threat to Europe, one would think that one would have produced 155 millimeter
Yeah.
shells for the howitzers. And so one can reason that, nobody really took Russia seriously as a threat once the Soviet Union imploded, once Gorbachev and once Putin reached out and said, look, let us join NATO. So why build 155 million when you can spend all that money on these high-tech things like aircraft, like the
Mhm.
F-35 that costs $500 million. Let's
Very
do that instead. So as a result of that, the inevitable conclusion is the Russians had no idea of attacking Western Europe. They had no idea of attacking Ukraine until they were forced to it. And I can prove that they had no other choice. What was going on there against Russian speaking people in the Donbass, what the
Yeah.
Nazis were doing in Kiev, the rest of it, Putin went in with limited aims, and that's provable by the amount of forces that he put into it. And then his immediate, they reached an agreement, for God's sake, at the end of March, April 2002. So can we reach agreement now? Well, of
Yeah.
course we have to reach an agreement now. We have to get rid of this shibboleth, this picture of the Russian ogre trying to pounce on Western Europe, where nothing is further from the truth. This was a defensive action, and it's easily proven to have been a defensive action. And I've been with this problem for more decades than I'm
Yeah.
care to admit.
Interesting. I know I did say the last word, but I have one more, Ray. I can't let you go without this, because to me, it's about time that this question has to sort of everybody has to talk about this one. And this question is this: is it over for NATO? Is NATO irrelevant? Given what just took place now,
Yeah.
what the Russians showed, the strength vis-a-vis what's taking place in Ukraine, is NATO is irrelevant?
David, that's a good question. The reality is that NATO is the United States.
True.
It used to be more than the United States, but the United States is what's becoming irrelevant.
Mm.
Bear in mind, there are all kinds of people objected to creating NATO way back in the late 1940s. 49, I think, was created. And they said, if you create NATO, that will be a military alliance, and the Russians they're gonna react really badly. Now, most people don't really know that NATO came first. Only 6 years later did the Russians get so scared that they say, my God, we better create the Warsaw Pact. Okay.
Right.
So which came first? NATO. What was
Yeah.
the idea? To keep the Russians out of Europe, to keep the US in Europe, and keep the Germans
Down.
down, keep them
Right.
divided. So, little footnote here. When I heard that Gorbachev and other people were entertaining the idea of a reunited Germany. I mean, my reaction was, you know, maybe I saw too many war movies when I was a kid, but that, NATO was not to let a reunite. So now the U.S. and people know this suffered maybe 440,000 people dead in World War II. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a lot. That's really sorrowful. Okay, the Russians suffered 26 million with an M people dead
Yeah.
in World War II. Now, we have this great ocean between Europe and us, so we would save the destruction as well as the people lost. The Russians, not so much. So here's the U.S. going to Gorbachev and Shevardnadze, his foreign secretary, foreign minister, and saying, "Look, here's the deal. We want a reunited Germany." Now, they probably went the same way. And so, okay, that's a big quid. That's a tough pill. What are you going to give us? Where's the quo for this quid? And that's where Baker, this smart lawyer from Texas, James Baker,
James.
Secretary of State for Bush, he said, well, how would it be? Yeah, how's this for an idea? We will promise, cross your heart, hope to die, not to move NATO 1 inch to the east. How would that be? Well, at that point, the Russians were so much in need of the kind of economic health that we had already given the Poles, okay? And that they just needed us, and they trusted us. And last thing I'll say is when I talked to Kuvaldin, what's his name? Victor? No, I forget his name and patronym. His name was Kuvaldin. He was he's in all the photos there of the talks, okay? The talks when James Baker came. So I asked Mr. Kuvaldin, I was in Moscow about 10 years ago, and I said, why was that promise not written down? And he looked at me and he said, Mr. McGovern, hey, I'll give you the two valid but not satisfactory answers. One is the Warsaw Pact still existed, so we had it. And the second one is we need to get explicit German buy-in, and that hadn't been happened yet. But the real reason, Mr. Governor, you want to know what the real reason was? I said, yeah. He said, we trusted you.
Wow.
Now, there's no trust left. There's no communication left. So we have to make sure that our leaders, to the extent we can, proceed more sensibly than they've done in the past. And when they lose in Ukraine, take it on the chin, dress it up as much as you can, put as much lipstick on that pig as you can, but don't start thinking about mini nukes or other ways to show how strong you are and how this continent is not big enough for both of us.
Very, very, very interesting. Wow, wow. Well, guys, I hope you find the insights from Mr. McGovern very insightful. I'm sure you will not take my word for it, as one been around enough to know how the media can manipulate the language and so forth. You won't hear this anywhere else, and we are very grateful to Ray for really carving out time for us, because I'm sure, yes, he's retired and so forth, but beside the point, he had to enjoy his life and so forth. But for him to give us this time to sit here and share this knowledge that you will not get anywhere else, we are very, very grateful. Thank you so much, Ray. We truly appreciate it. Appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you again. For you guys,
most
make
welcome.
sure to hit the like button, and look forward to seeing you next time. As always, prepare yourself for a changing world order. Till next time. Bye-bye.